Oh, yeah.
You guys having a good time? Y'all ready to keep this show rolling, man?
We're just getting started. You guys want some more show? What do you say?
Let the rubber come to the stage.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, everybody, to the Ted Alexandro Show. Coming to you live in the morning. Yes, indeed. That early morning energy that only the hour of 11 a.m. Eastern can capture. I am here at the studio headquarters in Astoria, Queens, New York, these United States of America. Very excited for today's show. We have the man, the myth, the legend, Gary Gulman will be joining us later in the show. Gary is a dear friend, a master comedian, a maestro, if you will, and you will. So I'm excited to be chatting with my man, my friend, Gary Gulman, coming up a little bit later. Doing the show in the morning, those of you who are avid, rabid Ted Alexandro Show fans know that we ordinarily live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern every Monday and Thursday. Today we're doing it a little bit earlier for a number of reasons, but it had me thinking about the morning vibe. You know what I mean? The morning vibe. We here at the Ted Alexandro Show do not necessarily have what I would call a morning vibe. And I encourage you, first of all, to please hit subscribe on the channel and hit that notification bell as well, if you would. And as I look at myself, I notice the beard is robust and trimmed to a razor's edge, if that's the proper analogy. I don't think it is. So please subscribe. 28 years in comedy, I have done a lot of morning shows, morning radio. If you're a comedy fan, you are well aware of that part of the deal. Many comedians have done bits on it. I remember specifically, I think David Cross did a great bit on morning radio and that whole dynamic. So if you're a comedy fan, perhaps you're aware that comedians, when we go into a city, when we travel, in the old days, this is obviously pre-pandemic, we would arrive on usually a Thursday, God forbid, a Wednesday or a Tuesday. And you're in a city for, let's say typically Thursday through Saturday. And on the Friday morning, the club likes to have you go and do a round of press. So they have a publicist, they put together a press, run, a tour, a packet where you go from radio station to radio station. You sometimes you do TV morning shows as well. And again, the energy could not be more opposite to what comedians have to offer. These morning radio things are, Bubba the guy and the girl. That's usually the dynamic. Or, the guy will usually have a name like that. The torpedo, the other guy, and the other girl, These are always the names. They're almost always white guys. always with a white girl. And they're, as hearkening back to the last episode, it's always a broy kind of vibe. It's always a broy morning vibe. Sound effects, fair amount of sound effects. Bow, bow. Fake applause and all this stuff. Everything about it is fake. Everything about it is unsettling for me. So you would go wake up, 5:30, 6 a.m. Comedians obviously are on the opposite clock. You go 5:30. You get picked up. You go to the first radio station, and, if you zoom out, most of these stations are owned by Clear Channel or some conglomerate. As we all know, most of what we consume, either that we hear, that we read, that we see, they're owned by the same 5 companies or whatever. And these companies are not progressive. They're not progressive companies. They're not artistic minded. So they want Bubba, the guy and the girl, to distract you on your way to work. They want to distract you as you wake up and be bombarded with a cacophony of inane, meaningless contests and distractions from you participating in any real way in your society or even in your own life. So they insert the comedian of the week into this dynamic. And there were exceptions, okay? Let me make that clear as well. I don't want to throw everybody under the bus. But most of you get under. You belong under. And I'm not starting the bus and driving it away, but I just want you under a parked bus. That is your punishment for the crimes you have perpetrated upon humanity with your morning radio and morning television, offering nothing. There were exceptions. There were good listeners, people who you could tell were comedy fans, people with some sense of a soul. You could see it flickering, or oftentimes you could see it. It was palpable. But those were exceptions. Those were exceptions. Ordinarily, it was you could tell they didn't know who you were. They didn't care. It was more of a nuisance, that you were being brought in. Maybe they had strained relationships with the comedy club. They didn't even want you there. So there are a lot of dynamics at play, and you as the comedian are thrust into that to sell tickets, to drum up support for your shows. Friday and Saturday night, 2 shows Friday, 2 Saturday. And I remember cases where they would have these contests where it was women in bikinis coming in the morning, and, you make eye contact with one of them and you're just I don't know if I feel worse for you or for me. At least you'll be in bed by a reasonable hour. I have to do a 10:30 show tonight. So, you just feel icky. The whole thing feels icky, not to say nothing of the absurdity of, why you would, for starters, why would you have women in a bikini, period, but specifically on a radio show? Why is that? How this is pre cameras in the studio, pre live streaming, just women coming in bikinis to be part of some contest, and it's trust us, they're wearing bikinis. And it's as embarrassing for all of us as you think it is. So as a retired comedian, I have these flashes where I think back to the years of, and people think, people, I have so many thoughts, folks. I have so many thoughts about this. People think when you're a comedian that you're living your dream, and you are, certainly. But there are so many of these hurdles of things you have to, the obstacle course, things you have to find your way through. And some comedians are built for it, and not to say that I was bad at it. I enjoyed certain aspects of like getting some material out there. They would set you up for things. Because, with certain ones, you were better off just sticking to your material. Just give them a little taste of what you'll see that night. But as I say, others of them were actually listening and could engage in conversation. But certainly they don't want to have any sort of conversation that veers into anything meaningful, nothing socio-political. Those morning shows. You're on your way to work. The last thing they want is an authentic moment, a real moment, a moment where you might actually think, engage with the world in some way. They just want, bow, bow, yeah, it's Bubba and the Love Joe. Oh, weather on the ones, traffic. Oh, sports. Hey, let's say something about women. Hey, the girl's laughing. She's laughing. So it must be funny. And we'll be back right after this. And we're playing Sugar Ray because I'm visioning the late 90s. So it's just that barrage. They even talk in an inhuman way. I think they're all like, maybe they're on cocaine. Maybe it's a mix of just, coffee, amphetamines. Who knows what they're doing, but I'm not at their speed. So this is one of many things that I'm very pleased is in my rear view mirror, and I am driving a bus and they are under it, but it is parked. Just that whole world, right? And it's not specific to radio. It's anything you watch in the morning, right? The morning, Good Morning America, Hoda and Kathy, and the insanity of these. And aren't Kathy and Hoda, aren't they drinking wine at like 7 a.m? Like, is it any wonder this country is where it is? You wake up with Kathy and Hoda, and they're drinking wine. They're drunk. It's the only way to get through life, the life that they live and the life that they're hoping you're living to continue watching. Dressed like they're on the red carpet, drinking wine at 7 a.m. to distract you from having any real engagement in your own life, to try to sell you something. Chief among them, a lifestyle that involves you drinking wine at 7 a.m. Right? All these people. Wasn't Matt Lauer? Didn't people wake up with Matt Lauer? And I mean that in the literal sense of, God forbid you ever should wake up with Matt Lauer. But these are the people that were fed, and every little market has its replication of that. Kathy and Hoda in the morning, Matt and the ladies. And you got to go on, and you're going to be, hey, comedian Ted Alexandro is going to be here. So you're a comedian. Yeah, I am. Put down your wines. I want to set you straight. Put it down. What the hell are you people doing? Why are you dressed like that? Why are you wearing so much makeup? Where did you get that wine? Maybe I'll come out of retirement just to do if I can do one last morning show. It's insane. It's insane. So, welcome to the Ted Alexandro show in the morning, folks, where I'm drinking water. I did have a coffee earlier, but a sensible cup. I did know cocaine. I did not take an amphetamine. I am merely here to bring you joy and maybe provoke some thought. Whatever you would like to think. That's not on me. You know, what I'm saying may conjure certain things. Once again, we encourage you to hit subscribe. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for notifications so you will be alerted whenever we are going live. Typically, Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. is when we go live. But occasionally, like today, we dip into the morning vibe. I want to take down the Kathys and Hodas of the world. I want to see if I can hone in, edge them out in the morning market. So here we are. I'm very excited about a particular story that I noticed just this morning, actually. I had been tracking it over the last week or so. But the WNBA has been taking a very firm stance with Black Lives Matter, with justice for Breonna Taylor. Both the WNBA and the NBA have been, as the professional sports leagues go, front and center with regards to prioritizing social justice and specifically the movement for Black lives. Now, the most recent incarnation of this or offshoot of this is the Atlanta franchise. I believe it's the Atlanta Dream. They have essentially been in a battle with their owner. And again, as so often happens in professional sports, this could not be a more perfect distillation, coalescence of all of the dynamics of capitalism, government, corporatism. And this one goes above and beyond. The Atlanta Dream of the WNBA are owned, 49% of their ownership is Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler. She is the 49%. I guess it's, I don't know if that makes her a minority owner or if the other 51% is broken up or if someone has that, whatever the case may be. But she has 49% ownership in the franchise, which is significant. Now, not only is she the 49% owner of the WNBA franchise, the Atlanta Dream, she is also a senator from Georgia. She is the senator, Republican senator, and also owns a sports franchise. Now, she has come out in recent weeks, going back to maybe mid-July, speaking out against Black Lives Matter. Speaking out, saying that it is y'all ready to shit on a movement that represents your team? So Kelly Loeffler came out and she wrote a statement saying that Black Lives Matter was in fact disrespecting the flag, and it was introducing politics to sports, which is, is there anything more perfect than a senator who owns a team saying we need less politics in sports? because of the fact that the league was centering Black Lives Matter, the players union had voted upon it, the coaches, I guess the majority of the owners, the league there had been a league-wide initiative to center Black Lives Matter. They were wearing like Justice for Breonna Taylor t-shirts. Many of the teams were walking off the court before the playing of the national anthem. So there was a real, I found it to be radical, and in the best way, like audaciously radical, to demonstrate using professional sports as a platform to center these social justice movements, and to center the movement for Black lives specifically. And the WNBA is 80% African American, and the ownership, of course, is largely white and wealthy, and the plot thickens because Senator Kelly Loeffler is also married to the CEO of the stock exchange. That's who her husband is. So she's married to the owner, the CEO. I don't even know, some of this stuff is beyond me. How do you own the stock exchange? I don't even know. All it really means is, it's shady. There's some shady shit going on. So Loeffler, coincidentally, was also one of the senators who a couple of months ago was involved in the insider trading issues, where a number of senators who had been briefed about the pandemic and had been briefed about the potential for the stock exchange to fall, if not collapse, they sold a bunch of stocks, right? So Senator Loeffler, whose husband is the CEO of the stock exchange, what's his name? Spector, I think, Jeff Spector. So she dumps millions of dollars worth of stock, as do several other senators who had been briefed by the Trump administration about the coming pandemic and the coming possibility of an economic collapse. So they dumped millions of dollars and essentially made money. So it was kind of collusion, insider trading, that was eventually dismissed because why? Because it's like police culture, right? They investigate their own crimes and they deem it, fine, not problematic. So to me, this Senator Kelly Loeffler, who by the way came by her Senate seat, because the prior senator resigned for health reasons, and then I think the governor just appointed her. So she didn't win an election. She, I guess, applied for the job. There was some sort of online application process, and Kelly Loeffler, wife of the CEO of the stock exchange, with a lot of money and a lot of influence, because what does that also buy you? It buys, campaign contributions, paying off people like, I'm sure, this governor, who then selected her to be with no prior political experience. Does that remind you of anyone? No, she was a business person, and she was assigned to this seat, did not win an election. So here's where the WNBA comes in. Here's where ratcheting things up yet another notch comes in. So what are they doing? Not only are they advocating for Black Lives Matter, the WNBA players, not only are they wearing shirts, justice for Breonna Taylor, not only are they walking off the court prior to the playing of the national anthem to draw attention to these social justice movements in the United States, aligning themselves with the movement for Black lives. Now they've gone one step further. The Atlanta Dream team and now several other WNBA teams, I think notably the Seattle Storm, the Phoenix Mercury, these teams have taken to wearing shirts that say "Vote Warnock," because there is an upcoming election where Senator Kelly Loeffler is finally facing an election to see if she retains that seat or not. So that's coming up in November. So these WNBA players, and I find this very invigorating and really a template for other athletes to follow. And I hope the NBA is paying attention. I hope the other professional leagues are paying attention, because this is what real advocacy looks like. This is what real kind of putting your platform to proper use and putting your collective power, because it's really the intersection of labor too, right? Because these are, the players union kind of discussed this and voted on it and decided to center these things. And obviously the ownership, the wealthy, white, connected ownership of this team does not support the very things that the players, these majority Black women, are advocating for. So now the players have taken to wearing shirts as they enter the arena. I think even on the court during warmups, "Vote Warnock." So Reverend Raphael Warnock is a candidate who is opposing Senator Loeffler in November. And the WNBA has made this bold move to insert themselves into politics now, insert themselves into, the realm of voting, and specifically voting out people who do not support their interests. And ironically, the owner of the team that they play for, one of the owners of, the WNBA franchise, the Atlanta Dream. So I think this is it's kind of unprecedented, really, and kudos to the WNBA players for having such a fierce advocacy and for not backing down in the face of power and money and in this case even political power and connections. They are putting their communities first. They're putting the betterment of our country first. And again, like all of these people, and Loeffler is one of them, who essentially say some version of shut up and dribble, because Loeffler said, the truth is we need less, not more, politics in sports. Senator Loeffler said that. Less politics. She owns a sports franchise. We need less politics. In a time when polarizing politics is as divisive as ever, sports has the power to be a unifying antidote. And that's exactly what these WNBA players are doing. They are being a unifying antidote. That's exactly what they are doing. They are speaking up against this wealthy senator married to the CEO of the stock exchange, participates in insider trading, allegedly. fights against the rights of the very people she employs. It's so astounding that you can own a team comprised primarily of black women and willfully be so ignorant of the plight of the community from which they came, that they are telling you, could not be making it any more clear the issues that are present in America, specifically in policing, but obviously it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that into funding, overfunding of police departments, underfunding of the communities from which many of these women come. They could not be making it any more clear. And the likes of Kelly Loeffler, she's a perfect avatar for the tone-deaf response. Not even just tone-deaf, completely deaf. And no disrespect to the deaf community. She is not hearing, is what I'm saying. She is willfully choosing not to hear that people are demanding changes. People are demanding changes and doing so using their platform. And Loeffler said, this is just more proof that the out-of-control cancel culture wants to shut out anyone who disagrees with them. She's referring to the players wearing a Vote Warnock shirt. It's the cancel culture. They want to shut out anyone who disagrees with them. It's clear that the league is more concerned with playing politics than basketball, and I stand by what I wrote in June. We come together around sports, but promoting a political agenda divides us rather than unites us. The lives of every African American matter. I think that's not properly said. The life of every African American matters, she should have said. And there's no place for racism in our country. There's no place for it. If we don't talk about it, it goes away. But I oppose the Black Lives Matter political organization due to its radical ideas and Marxist foundations. Oh. Groucho? Zeppo? Which include defunding the police and eroding the nuclear family. Now we're getting very Republican Cody. The nuclear family. Is that alluding to the movement advocating for LGBTQI and for is it due to? Is that, I'm guessing that's the code there. That's the code, right? Nuclear family usually means a white father, white mother, and 2 white kids. Wealthy, the father owns, CEO of the stock exchange. The mother used to work for him, got appointed to a Senate. Is that the nuclear family we're talking about? So she really is, she's the perfect avatar for all of this kind of power that does not understand who it serves. So kudos to the WNBA players, specifically the Atlanta Dream, and all of the players who are now joining in this movement to say, vote her out. I mean, how audacious is that? The owner, who's often sitting courtside, they're wearing vote for the other guy, vote for Reverend Raphael Warnock. So this is beautiful. Seattle Storm guard said, it's bigger than basketball. We're more than athletes. To have someone in our league that doesn't represent or support African Americans, which is 80% of our league, it's disheartening. It's sickening. That's Jordan Canada of the Seattle Storm. And I agree with her. It is sickening. And as I often say, I am emboldened by people taking the next audacious act. And this is certainly audacious of the WNBA players to illustrate to others how to act audaciously, how to act in your integrity, illustrating the power of the group, the power of the whole, because that's really what it takes. Otherwise, how are you going to stand up to the likes of an owner who is also a senator, who's connected to the power structure of essentially white supremacy, all of the ills that plague our society? How are you going to stand up unless you do that collectively, which is exactly what the WNBA is doing? So kudos to them for their example, for their fierce, unflinching example of how to stand up for justice and how to be an advocate for those without a voice. So as I said, it started with supporting Black Lives Matter, calling for justice for Breonna Taylor. But now it's the next level where the WNBA players are literally inserting themselves into an election and saying, vote out Kelly Loeffler, who owns the Atlanta Dream. Very exciting times, folks. Very exciting times. Kudos to the whole WNBA. Kudos to the players. And I hope it catches fire and spreads, and that players realize the power that they have to impact society, to impact these decisions, and to and also spread the message so that others see and make these connections. So I could not be happier to see the things that I'm seeing happening in the WNBA. Kudos to the players of the Atlanta Dream and the entire league. And hopefully they will vote out Kelly Loeffler. And this Reverend Raphael Warnock will be the senator down in Atlanta. Well, my friends, very excited to have our guest today. This man is near and dear to my heart. He is one of the best in the business. His special, The Great Depresh, was a masterwork that really just set the comedy world ablaze. And I'm happy to call him my friend. I'm happy to have him here on the show. Let's welcome the legend, Gary Gulman. Oh, baby. There he is. Gary.
Hi, buddy.
How are you, pal?
I'm terrific.
You look terrific.
I do.
You look like a man of leisure.
That's what I've become. Although I'm working. I'm writing a book that I think you will really enjoy because it's a memoir of kindergarten through 12th grade. And I know your feelings about that and your memory for it and your amusement over it. So I think it'll be a good read for you. I know a lot of times we get sent books that we're not interested in, but this one I think is will be up your alley because also we're just about the same age.
When I see the name Gary Gulman on the cover of a book, I am reading that book. I guarantee you, no matter the subject. But that does sound like it's in my wheelhouse.
That's a great blurb. Oh, that's a perfect blurb.
I speak in blurbs, my friend. You know that about me.
Yes.
So how are you, buddy? How is life in the pandemic treating you? These are very odd, very specific times. How are you keeping?
Well, I feel almost guilty because I have this project, and so I have something to work on every day, and it occupies my mind and my time, and I can send it out, and people can give me feedback on it, and so I feel like I'm in the mix of something. So I feel. I mean, I've always walked around with guilt over my blessings and whatnot. That my mind won't let me wrap my head around the fact that I'm not doing anything wrong right now by not getting out on stage every night and working. So it's not perfect, but I'm in a much better position than most people. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
And that's such an interesting point to make. And one of the things that I love about you, just kind of core to your being, is this outlook of gratitude, this perspective that sees beyond yourself. And that's not really encouraged in American society or in comedy specifically, where, you know, I think we're kind of encouraged to have a narrow, more selfish look, a perspective on the world, and to, you know, make sure that you're doing everything you can for yourself in this kind of winning, this winning paradigm of looking at life. And you certainly have, both with your special, and I think it's kind of a theme that runs through your comedy. You see the larger picture. You see your place in the world, and you know, kind of the whole of society. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I keep coming back to this expression that they attribute to I think Barry Switzer, who doesn't seem sharp enough to come up with this great quote, but he talks about people being born on third base and think they hit a triple, and
that's his quote?
He's given credit for it.
Uh-huh.
And I've tried so hard to find an origin, but it's usually attributed to him or a Texas journalist, but the Texas journalist, I can't remember his name right now, so I have to say Barry Switzer. But the point is that I was born on third base, and I recognize that I was born on third base in the fact that I'm a white male who grew up in a time when public schools were funded, and I had my mother received welfare benefits, food stamps, and all these things, and there wasn't the demonizing of the poor, and there wasn't the idea that this was a handout. And so I had athletic gifts that really I had no right to. Neither of my parents were great athletes. My brothers were marginal athletes, and so I got a scholarship to play football at Boston College, which is this great Jesuit learning institution that I never would have even gotten into, never mind gotten free tuition and board. So and also I'm of above average intelligence. So I had all these things that I had nothing to do with. I didn't select them. I didn't choose them over anything else. And I as I'm writing this book, I'm thinking back to my mindset when I was a little kid. There was this thing, and I don't know where I got it from, but I felt like, well, I was very religious without knowing much about religion. I believed God was controlling things at all times. And I was convinced that God was going out of his way to make everything fair. So the fact that I could read really well in first grade, that was my gift. But somebody who wasn't a good reader in first grade, then they would be really good looking. That would be their reward. Because I remember this really cute kid who sat in front of me. I was like, this kid is sounding out but he's so cute. This is how God works. He's evening the playing field. And then I got to eighth grade, and I was like, oh no, there's no justice. There's no God looking out there. There are kids who are not only unattractive, but they're reading at a fourth grade level, and I was disillusioned and very, very sad. I still had this great conversation with God going, but it was hard to wrap my mind around the inequality. And I've really never stopped. Like I don't want everybody to feel guilty, but there should be some shame involved in the obstacles that were put in place for people who were not born on third base like I feel I was, and given so many advantages over the years. So when I was listening to you with Laurie Kilmartin yesterday, I was thinking that the women who started off in comedy 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, were facing this obstacle. And it really hit me when she said, I couldn't say anything because I was begging for a $500 a week work.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to complain because the headliner is making lewd and obnoxious comments to me in the green room, and the MC is making it difficult for me by talking about my body or whatever it is that women have to go through.
Yeah.
And so I to hear a lot of white male comedians say, "Oh, I can't get any work anymore. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't get a special." I think, well, I feel bad for you, and I'm not going to rub it in your face, but we had a really good run where it was really easy, and we never said, or few of us ever said, "Hey, these other people are having a really hard time of it. Can we get less work and maybe even things out a bit?" We didn't complain about that. And I was talking about this with Todd Glass the other day, who also listened to the episode and was raving about it. And he said, we were talking about, I said, "Todd, do you remember women complaining about how little work they were getting because they were women? Was there a lot of that going on? How they couldn't get a special, how they couldn't get headlining work?" And there may have been some, not as much as I hear these guys now.
Right. And I think, that is kind of like a side effect of all of these movements that many people are quick to deride. But what it has done is it has centered people advocating for themselves, whether it's Me Too, Black Lives Matter, so many of the social justice movements that have taken root. It has kind of mainstreamed advocating for yourself and not putting up with this kind of shit. So I hear a lot of the things that you're talking about as well, with, white guys saying, and they'll even, they'll say it to me kind of conspiratorially, like, I mean, come on, Ted, you should have this or that, or you should be, and I say the same thing. I'm like, look, I was on Comedy Central for over a decade. It's not like, what am I going to suddenly complain that the system is failing me? Like the system that I was thriving in was fucked up, like the system that elevated me, whatever my gifts may have been, it was built for me, so I have no problem with a system that's leaving me out to whatever extent it is now, and fortunately, the system that we're in obviously needs to be mended. But as you say, I think we need to start from a place of acknowledging the ills of the system. So I like that you do that. And I wanted to just jump off to a point that you made in the Great Depresh, which I loved. And I told you that, and I want to tell you that again, because it was really the melding of the highest craft of comedy and the telling of a personal story, and a particularly vulnerable story. So thank you for that. But I wanted to also just point out that you talked about millennials in a way that I love, that was counter to the narrative of mainstream society, and specifically, I think, comedy culture, that likes to comedy culture can often be, as I said in that episode with Laurie Kilmartin, can be steeped in kind of white bro culture and goes for the easy laugh of like shitting on really everyone, and specifically anyone who's trying to point out an injustice. And in the Great Depresh, you spoke about millennials in a way that you said how kind they were to one another, and you spoke about them in a way that was kind of radical within stand-up comedy circles. Can you discuss the piece that I'm talking about, the piece of
the certainly,
Depresh?
and I appreciate that you appreciate it, because your opinion and your taste are important to me. So I will say that, and you probably noticed this too, you start to talk about millennials at a comedy club where they're not there to see you. So when I go to the Comedy Cellar or to the West Side Comedy Club or Gotham, the audience doesn't know I'm going to be on the show usually when I'm working out. And they've seen a lot of stand-up that night, and also they've also seen a lot of stand-up in their life. And so they kind of know what stand-ups all talk about. They all talk about how for years it was about how bad their mother-in-law was, about how lousy their wife's cooking was. And now it's about how entitled, lazy, and weak millennials are. And so when I see that, just I question it, because it's so easy. And I also have a millennial wife. I have nephews, nieces. I have people in my audiences that are there to see me, and they think in a better way than I did when I was a kid. So when I went to college, we were all looking to get rich. We really wanted to get rich, and we could have been activists about things. And I try not to feel guilty over not being more active in social movements back then. But it's more shame, because I feel like if we or I know you were always involved in this, but if more of us had been involved in that, then these kids now wouldn't have to put on a mask and go out there at a time when really they're literally risking their lives to go out there. Okay, so when I hear every comedian, and a lot of comedians who I have to be honest with you, I'm not that impressed with. I think they just are doing covers, maybe not of jokes, but of premises. They're doing premise covers, which is millennials are this, that, and the other thing. The audience is on board with them, and the audience is expecting it. So I would bring up millennials, and I would hear the audience.
And if I could interrupt just for 1 second, Gary, because in a way it's an offshoot of that. It's a whole genre of comedy, right? That
yes.
Like, we had it harder than but now it's like they have a new word, millennials. They have a new word to attach to it.
It's just kids these days comedy, and I don't want to put my act on your show because it's like I'm pimping you, but one thing I said was that kids these days humor was pretty hacky. When Bye Bye Birdie came out, it was already, and so I'm not impressed by it. I don't want to do it. And also I have some pretty valid arguments about the behavior of millennials in general. And studies have been done. They're much less selfish than we were. They're much less motivated by money and status than we were. They're much less concerned with materialism and things like that. They're much more concerned with the environment. They're on a whole better people than me. So as a comedian or as good comedians, you and I were always looking for something that nobody else is saying. And I used to think to myself, why are these hacks making it so easy for me to stand out, to be different? It shouldn't be this easy. I just have to say pretty much the opposite of what they're saying. I have to have a reasonable stand on peanut allergies. That's how easy you're making it for me. People screaming that there were no peanut allergies in the 70s. There were a number of peanut allergies in the 70s. So I took that, I put it on stage, and I think it's and they're much more aware of mental health issues. There's much less of a stigma within their community. They go to therapy, and they're not sneaking into their therapist's office like I did in 1989 for the first time, and embarrassed and not telling everybody, not even my girlfriend, that I was in therapy and that I was depressed. So I think, I mean, you use the word radical, which I think is interesting, because maybe it's radical in the context of mainstream stand-up comedy, but in a sense, it's reason.
Sure. Yeah, and that always seems to be the case when something radical hits the mainstream, is that it truly is common sense, and it's rooted in the most basic of kind of human decency, but oddly that becomes radical.
I mean, how often do you think about, and I don't know if it's my fear of mortality or selfishness or ego, but I think a lot, and Todd Glass and I discussed this, and I'll ask a lot of comedians. I think to myself a lot, how will this hold up? How will this hold up in 10 years, in 20 years? I'm not saying that I want to do my act the same way for 20 years, but I think about takes and opinions and think, are people going to look back in 30 years like I do with certain Carlin stuff and Bob Newhart and think, this guy was prescient. This guy was, Dick Gregory, my word. And Pryor and yes, there are things that you hear from them and you think, well, that's silly. I don't know that holds up. But for the most part, these things hold up, and I listen. I don't think about a legacy or pretentious things like that. But I do hope that I won't be cringing when I hear my act when I'm in my 70s, and that people will say, no, I think you were. It's not that hard to be on the side of right. I hear a lot of excuses. It was a different time. My father, your father, my father was in World War II. I never heard him say even the Jewish ethnic type things that everybody gets a pass for, like behind your backs, Gentiles are often referred by Jews as goyim, and my father would not allow that. He found that so condescending, and he wouldn't allow that, and he was right. He was right, and people would say you're a prude, you're puritanical, you're soft, and he wasn't soft. He was actually a very strong, tough-minded man who served in a war, and yet he was careful with his words. It was inspiring, and he was proven right.
Yeah, and I'll have you know that my father was a Shabbos goy, which
oh, that's incredible! Explain that to people who are Jewish impaired.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but my dad grew up in Brooklyn, and in a Jewish section of Brooklyn, and
that was called Brooklyn.
That was called Brooklyn at the time. And being goyim, being a Catholic boy, he would perform tasks for Jewish families who, after sundown on Friday, could not do certain things, whether it was turning lights on or off, or certain, they weren't allowed to engage with certain things during the Sabbath. So they had these what was the term again?
Shabbos goy.
Shabbos goy. So my dad was the Shabbos goy for many of these Jewish families.
It's a loophole in the Jewish religion that you can't turn on the lights, you can't turn on the television, but you can get a family friend to do it for you. And I'm sure God is detaching his retinas, rolling his eyes at that. I can't. Or what if you turned it on yourself? Is God saying, no, you're not getting into heaven. You need to get a Gentile to do that for you. There are these loopholes are comical.
Yeah. I think God probably enjoys the ingenuity of it, that they found the loophole.
God loves a Rube Goldberg device as much as anybody.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, because you came up through the Boston scene, and I was reflecting on, we're peers in terms of our when we started and kind of the road that we took. And I think also the kind of turns that we've made, because we kind of came up as club comics in these, we had to become battle tested in these insane rooms, you in
Yes.
Boston and me in
Yes.
kind of Long Island, the Long Island scene, because I was going back and forth between, Long Island had a thriving scene at the time that I was starting, early 90s, as well as, the New York City scene, obviously. But that Long Island scene was a big part of my formative years in comedy. And it was kind of hellacious in terms of, it was conservative, blue collar, and a lot of the types of comedy that you were talking about. It wasn't like me as I exist now. It would have been very hard to be that then. Now, my question to you, I was thinking about specifically the Great Depresh and your evolution as a comedian, as an artist, as a human being. Do you think you could have formed the Great Depresh in the rooms that you came up in? Would that have even been possible, or is it?
No,
Yeah.
no way. I could have answered that before you even got to the part. Ted, it was difficult to work it out in the clubs in New York City in 2018 when I first started writing it. There were certain aspects I would always have to open with stuff that had nothing to do with me being hospitalized for crippling depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
I had to ease into it. I had to abandon it some nights because they were just put off by it. And I think you were talking about this with Laurie, and the one question I and I'm sure we know the answer to this is you were talking about something that I've considered a lot, and I forget the term you used for it, but it's the idea that you are using every aspect of your life and existence and on stage and off stage to create something. And so the fact that your father was a Shabbos goy is this thing that you didn't think would ever come in handy, and then today it's the perfect thing to discuss. So every aspect of your life comes into play, including the fact that you are 25 years into a comedy career and you know exactly how to say things. So I felt like I'm not comparing myself to this guy, but this is a good analogy. I remember hearing an interview with John Singleton in which he said that he went to film school to learn how to write Boys in the Hood. Now, I didn't write Boys in the Hood, but I wrote my Boys in the Hood, which is this thing that has been an aspect of my life since I've known myself. And I needed at least 20 years of comedy to develop the skill, but more importantly, maybe the confidence to be able to deliver that. But then on top of that, I cultivated a small audience that would go with me the step after talking about state abbreviations, grapefruit, and cookies.
All classics.
Right, but they weren't as significant maybe or as heavy. They weren't as heavy as talking about electroconvulsive therapy and psych wards. But they trusted me.
Which can be abbreviated to ECT.
that they trusted me that I would get to some funny after I told them this thing about wanting to end my life. So they trusted me. But the audiences at the comedy clubs in New York City, they don't really know who I am. Maybe they know me from the Abbreviating the States or from Last Comic Standing when I was so much younger and less skilled. But they're gonna get tired or bored quickly if I do the theater version of the Great Depresh at the Comedy Cellar late night Friday after these guys just murder and women just murder on stage. And then I go up there and what I would do is I would say, who here has ever been recognized in the psych ward? And based on the reaction to that, whether they laughed, I would go into some depression stuff. But mostly I had to work that out at the Comedy Studio in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where I worked out most of it. And then I would sneak portions of what I worked out there into my road work and slowly built it over a year. So the idea of doing it in Boston in the 90s, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Although the Comedy Studio existed in the 90s when I was there, but I wasn't at a level where I could not fool around, but you know what I mean? Find the jokes, find the funny area, explore. I wasn't accomplished enough, and I wouldn't have known what to do. So I forget what the word you used for the way Laurie was able to combine her forces as a world-renowned writer and performer and these tragedies that were coming up in her life, and then to do it again with her mother because she was prepared, having done it with her father. She knew how to do this. I mean, I don't know where you...
Did I say distillation?
No, because I would have remembered that because it's such an esoteric, beautiful, obscure word that I've never said out loud. When I say it right now, distillation, that's the first time I've ever said that word. So I definitely would have remembered that. But I look for those opportunities in my work, those things where you say, oh, I was meant to talk about this. Somebody who didn't have the comedic skills and experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the last part, which I think is the confidence. They wouldn't be able to do it the same way I can, and the other side of it, because there was part of me that said, well, depression has been covered beautifully by Chris Gethard, Maria Bamford, and some other people. What do I bring to this? And at
two other people talked about it. Surely we're done.
Right, but they did it so well, and I didn't want to tread on that. The one thing I thought to myself is that I don't look like a person who gets really depressed and afraid and anxious and feels weak because I'm so big and so I'm not bragging about this, but I'm physically someone you would think has it all together.
Sure.
And I didn't. And I always found those stories from in particular, and I know this guy is he has a lot of contradictions, but the one thing that he spoke about that I really admired him for was Terry Bradshaw opened up about being depressed. And I thought, well, then it's not something that you cure by achieving. And I was convinced of that for a long time. And I think a lot of Americans are convinced of that I hate myself because I'm not great at something. And you are not born hating yourself. There's chemistry and environment, but I keep talking too much. What do you think of the role of confidence? Because that's one thing about you, Ted, that I've always admired from early on. You were going to, even in your, you talked about you talked about the master class that you're giving. You talked about movement and your confidence is so clear in your movement. And I admire that. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to watch the episode of the master class you're giving where you talk about movement, because it's something I still struggle with and I'm concerned with. And I'm like, why are my hands doing this? And I can, one thing about movement that I will say is comedians, stop holding on to the mic stand throughout the entire show. Instead of putting your anxiety into the mic stand, put it out there into the audience. It's a literal crutch.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. And thanks for those kind words. I think, you're conveying so much moment to moment anytime that you're on stage. And part of that is your physical comportment. And, I remember just studying in the early going, watching the way comedians took the stage, just, and I would watch on mute. Sometimes I encourage young comedians to do that, like watch a set with the volume muted and really look, because so much is being communicated with the body, with the face. So yeah, for me, I think I always had the physicality as an element of what I did, but over years, like you said, with any of our evolution as performers, that component of it, I think became more and more honed so that I could accentuate a joke with a facial expression, sometimes even with stillness, holding a pose, holding a face, whatever it is, you can accentuate something. And it also communicates power to people that, and I don't mean power in the sense of domination. I mean power that I'm comfortable rooting myself in this moment. So, I think you are communicating constantly on stage, whether you're speaking or not. So movement is part of that. I wanted to talk to you, Gary, about in the Great Depresh. This was really, for me, undergirding the whole story. It was the foundation of the story, the love story between you and Sade. I found that to be so integral to the whole journey, her companioning you through this experience, this at times crippling experience of depression and hospitalization. Can you speak a little bit about the love story aspect of the Great Depresh and that companionship, that love relationship with Sade?
Yes, and just so the audience who is unfamiliar, I want them to know that it is not the Sade. It's a Sade, and people have actually said the Sade, and I say yes. I'm doing a $25 spot on a Wednesday, even though I'm the heir to the Smooth Operator royalty stream. Yeah,
your love is king.
So I'm not married to the Sade, but I'm so glad you asked about that, because we were talking last night. We were talking about you and how supportive and kind you are to her, and so she just adores you, and she's very particular about who she lets in and who she's shy and sort of on the introvert side of the scale. So she's
my favorite Sade.
mine too. And so you are the first person to call it a love story, and I'm so glad, because that was so important. Because one thing was, we didn't have a lot of time. We only had we wanted to do about 15 minutes of documentary footage, and there was some really great stuff that we got at my childhood home and with our friend Bobby Kelly, and also me working out the jokes about electroconvulsive therapy for the first time at this great room in Brooklyn called Baby's All Right. And so there wasn't a lot of room, and I said, but we have to include Sade, because one of the most important aspects of my recovery is her companionship, her advocacy. She went to every single one of my psychiatry appointments and asked the questions. I was either embarrassed or ashamed, or because sometimes you don't want to ask a psychiatrist a question because, for instance, I think he's going to dismiss this as some sort of get rich quick scheme or cure all snake oil. And yet she showed me that he was very open to some ideas and some that he wasn't. And this is how far she went. She grew psilocybin mushrooms in our Midtown apartment, and she was so dedicated. It worked. It's not easy. The measurements and the watering and the light have to be so precise. And she did it because she read an article about the use of microdosing of hallucinogens to help with depression, and those studies are actually pretty far along, and they've been shown to be very helpful. So anyhow,
Wow.
the lengths she did, and she gave me a bracelet recently, and it was so lovely, and I think you'll love this. It said, "Love me until I'm me again." And that was the whole thing. The other thing that I don't think people know, and maybe you remember this, was that I fell off the deep end about 6 months into our relationship with Sade. She knew I had depression and anxiety, but it had been in remission for years and years. So we got into this relationship. We moved in together within 6 months, and then I fell apart. And I would ask her, why did you stay? Why are you staying? Get out while you can, woman. and she said, well, it was a really good 6 months. And two, that's not who I am. I'm not going to abandon ship. Get better, and then we'll see what we want to do then. And I mean, I'm not one of these people who says everything happens for a reason. I think I could have gotten the same appreciation for her and understanding of who she was if my episode lasted 6 months rather than 2.5 years. But it is the ultimate test of someone's love and loyalty to have to go through that with someone. And she visited me every day in the psych ward, and she was on the phone with me and in there, and she was so helpful and just took over. Yeah. She just took over for me, and she is like Madeline. She's a ride or die. She's something else.
Yeah, really powerful, and again, like we were saying earlier, kind of counter to the comedy narrative of like making your wife a punchline or making your partner in some ways, like I think that's almost another genre of comedy to dehumanize your partner. But I felt like the Great Depresh did the opposite of that. It really showed Sade, your partner, your partner, correct? I don't want to use the wrong terminology. Wife, partner?
Wife is good, yeah.
Wife, okay.
Yeah.
To show Sade as really the leader in the relationship at certain points, as any relationship has. There's times when one or the other leads. But I thought it was so counter to that prevailing narrative of the male kind of, and again, in comedy, you see this so often of like the male being in some way dismissive or the woman being less than. I thought the Great Depresh really, in such a beautiful, seamless way, showed that relationship in its fullness.
Oh, thanks, man. That means so much to me, and I can't wait for Sade to hear this, because I mean, I go out of my way in interviews to acknowledge that she's really the MVP of the story. She's the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
and that's an abbreviation for most valuable player.
Most valuable player, yeah. Of the but okay, so I don't want to give myself too much credit about being kind to women, because I was thinking of this again when I was listening to yesterday's episode, or I listened to it yesterday. I don't know if it came out yesterday, but don't these guys who are so obsessed with free speech and their art, supposedly, aren't they put off by the fact that they all sound like each other? That they're all doing different versions of their cult leaders, of the different factions within that fiefdom, that fiefdom that you were talking about, the bro wall, the bro club. Yeah, they're all talking about how, and they do the same voice for their women, and so and I don't mean this in a pretentious way, but as an artist, originality is so important to me. And even if I did have a nagging wife who emasculated me and had a high-pitched voice and sounded like a combination of Edith Bunker and Lucille Ball, I would not do it. It's too easy. It's been done. How am I going to stand out in this field? And one thing you were saying that I love this, and Todd and I were crowing about this. We were like, he said they're willing to say anything except that their wife is an intelligent, valuable contributor to their life, and yeah. that they are equals. If Sade is not my equal, she's so much smarter and reasonable than I am.
And there it is again, right? It's radical to say that the person with whom I chose to spend my life yes. is my partner, my equal, my superior in some ways. It's radical to, instead of doing like this caricature of essentially what are you really doing? All women, right? You're saying women. I'm talking about my wife right now, but you know what I really mean.
And it's paint by numbers comedy. And I remember saying one night at the Comedy Cellar, I said, my wife is a millennial and I love her. and everybody laughed like it was this crazy thing, because yes, it's very strange to hear a comedian say that he loves his wife.
That's true. Another radical notion. Yeah, and that's kind of intrinsic to the comedy culture that we came up in, that any kind of authentic expression of something that is perceived to maybe take your power away, right? To make yourself vulnerable is seen as not comedic terrain. It's like, if you're going to talk about your partner or anything for that matter, it can't be something that is rooted in vulnerability or appreciation or has a softness at its core. But it is nice to see that changing, and certainly the Great Depresh was a big part of that dynamic of that softness, kindness it's not mutually exclusive from funny. And I think that has been part of the comedy culture for a long time. That was looked down upon.
Nor is it separated from strength. I mean, sure. I forget what the exact quote by your Lord and Savior is, but my strength is made perfect in my weakness, or something according to those. So I
think that was Barry Switzer.
Jimmy Johnson. That's who it was. Jimmy Johnson. So I think that the more I learn and feel it, the real vulnerability was not when I went up there, or the real strength wasn't when I went up there and told jokes that were involved me being the hero of the story and really strong. They were the really strong, vulnerable ones that took some bravery, were the ones where I said, and I have to tell you, it was not brave. By the time I started talking about my hospitalization, I had gotten so much feedback in Cambridge at that club that I knew I was on the right side of things, and that I was, as long as it was funny, that the audience would go with me. Mm-hmm. I will say that the courage was when I admitted that I had a security blanket, a blankie, all through college, and that it was on my pillow right now. Like, that was something I've known about this aspect of my life since I was 2 years old. I wasn't comfortable saying it in front of strangers until I was in my late 40s. And I think that, and again, there was no reason to worry. The reward, the feedback was incredible. And I'm sure there's some people who are calling me a cuckold or or now they're so familiar with that term that now they call it cuck. And yes. These people who do not show much cultural knowledge have this really obscure, arcane word, cuckold, coming out of their mouths. And are they reading Madame Bovary? What is the source of this word that snowflake, but then even cuckold, and I get called a cuck because I am in favor of diminished suffering of the underclass, and I think that women should be paid equal to men. So and so they call me a cuck, which it means that my wife is unfaithful. I'm aware of it, and I'm fine with it. That is a huge leap from equal wages.
Yes. I don't recall.
I assure you.
Yeah, that was not one of the themes in Madame Bovary.
That I would be outraged if my wife cheated on me.
As would I. Yes. Yeah, it is. It is
Ted,
funny
I
that
can't hear you for some reason. What is going on?
Oh, are we okay, Matthew? Matthew, can you hear me?
I hear you guys. I hear you guys.
You hear me?
Very fine.
Oh, Gary, can you hear me, pal? Hello? I don't know why. Was it something I said? You can hear me though, Matthew?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Yes.
Gary, can you hear me?
It's odd.
I hear you guys both loud and clear. I don't know. The internet is a fickle mistress sometimes.
Maybe this is the internet calling us both cucks.
If I disconnect.
We're just a couple of snowflakes that the internet is making sure that we know that. No? Well, what do you think, Matthew? Should he redo the link just so we can wrap up properly?
Gary, can you hear me? Nope. Something's wrong on Gary's end, I'm going with.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was saying this was the internet or technology calling us both cucks. we will silence these two cucks once and for all. Well, pal, it was somewhat fortuitous because we are close to wrapping up. We've gone way over what I had asked from you, so my apologies for going beyond the time that I requested. But I wanted to just ask.
All right, one second.
Are we
Ted? On my end, I'm going to put my. I'm so sorry.
No need to apologize, my friend.
Live streaming, everybody.
That's right. All
right, I'm going to try to. Okay, I can.
Check. Can you hear me, buddy?
Yeah, I can. Okay, we're back. I think we should be good.
Okay, good.
All right.
So I just wanted to ask you, pal, having finished this, this masterpiece of the Great Depresh, and then usually you want to kind of enjoy that and begin the next, right? Like you, as comedians, we kind of want to put whatever hour we just did to bed. Are you finding satisfaction in working on the book, or are you missing that are you missing the stage to kind of cleanse the palate of putting that to bed and moving on, or is the book kind of providing that opportunity?
A couple of things I will say, Ted. One, you use the word pal a lot, and I understand that to mean one thing in New York and a different thing in Boston. Do you know that?
No, does pal mean like cuck in Boston?
No, it means fuckface.
Is that right?
Yeah. If
you mean like like if it's said derisively, like listen to me, pal.
Listen, pal. Somebody is about to tell you off if they call you pal. So I have had to translate it. It's sort of like the way the British are more comfortable with one word than they are with the word fanny for some reason.
Right.
Whereas we're fine with fanny, but there it's like a mortal sin to say it. But okay, so the first thing is that I used gratitude very well at the beginning of the pandemic to say, yes, this is not perfect that you had to cancel a tour midway through, and it's disappointing because I love doing live shows and I enjoy it, and the audiences were really enjoying it, and I had written a new hour and a half to tour with, and it was going really well. It's mostly about income inequality, but told similarly to the Depression through my story of growing up with free lunch and all those things. And I
love it.
Yeah. So I was working on that. I was very happy with where that was going. And then I said, I actually listed all the shows I did on tour before the pandemic. And I said, you really couldn't have timed it better under the circumstances. You should be grateful for this, and you have this book opportunity. So I think about certain guys that we know who don't have other outlets and aren't at a position in their career where they can do other things related to comedy, but not exactly stand-up comedy. And I wanted to either today or at some point talk to you about you writing a book, because your facility with language and your experience and your story is compelling, and so we should definitely talk about that either right now in front of everybody or over the phone, because it's more viable now than ever, and it will expand certain aspects of your writing and your thinking, and so it's actually very helpful in our art and in our work, and it also helps you to appreciate books you read even more, because you realize how skilled some of these people are and how unskilled others are, and get a pass because they made up this story about Leonardo da Vinci and Jesus Christ. So
I appreciate that, and that has been something that has kind of been coming back, and you've reintroduced it. So I think that is something that seems inevitable, that I will write something at some point.
There's a learning curve, and you just have to. The thing I kept having to say to myself is, I've figured out how to do things in the past that initially I said, this is impossible, I will never get it. And I just kept concentrating on that, and the fact that as recently as 3 years ago, I was like, I'll never be able to talk about depression on stage and make it funny. And so it's these things that you build confidence over the years, if you're a person who just doesn't have it naturally, and for however you get it, it's just a lot of times it's just living through failure and realizing that it doesn't kill you and it doesn't end your career. So the book has been a blessing and has kept my attention and made me feel productive and disciplined. I mean, the other thing is that I am fortunate that I had socked away enough money where I didn't have to worry about getting on the road and borrowing money. So I'm just so grateful for that I had that opportunity, and the timing couldn't have been better, because I thought of people who put out specials during the pandemic. They couldn't promote it. I know our friend Judd Apatow made a film, and he had to do all this promotional work over the internet and release the film that could have been in theaters and at what do you call those things? Festivals.
Yeah.
And distillation.
Yeah.
He and yes, when nobody's crying for Judd Apatow, but my timing for this couldn't have been better. I got to do promotion live, and so I know it sounds Pollyannish or whatever, but gratitude is a really useful antidepressant.
Well, buddy, I appreciate you, and I appreciate this dose of the antidepressant that you've given all of us with your attitude of gratitude. And also, I have no doubt that both the book and eventually the next hour, when that resumes, will be beautiful pieces of must-see, must-read work. So thanks for making time to be with me. I always love talking to you, buddy.
It was my pleasure. And yeah, our friendship means
Matthew, hold on, Matthew. Hold on.
Our friendship means the world to me. And the fact also that we don't always get to know our comedian friends' families very well, but as you know, my wife and I vacationed with your parents at an exclusive couples.
That was one of my favorite things
in St. Lucia, which is incredible. And I know your sister and your brother and your nephews and
yes, indeed.
They're, believe it or not, audience, they're all as lovely as Ted. And in fact, Ted is sort of the knave of the family.
That's true. I'm a bit of a scamp. Well, thanks, Gary. They all love you. They love you as well. You know, my nephews have been to see you, and you were so kind to them. And my whole family loves both you and Sade. So thank you for being on the Ted Alexandro show and for sharing so much wisdom and beauty with us.
How is Nico?
Nico is well, thank you. He's 7 months. He's flipping around. He hasn't crawled yet, but he's doing a lot of flipping.
Wow.
So yeah. I call him the Boston Flipper. I don't know why I say, it just felt like a literary character. So I say, You're the Boston Flipper, and he flips around and he laughs. So he's great. He's great.
All right. Well, we'll have to do this again soon, so we can discuss more.
I would love that.
Things, because we have a nice flow with each other.
Yes, we do.
Okay, and say hi to Madeline and the rest of the family. I love you, buddy.
I will. I love you too, and say hi to Sade.
I will. Okay, bye.
All right, buddy. Love you. Bye-bye. There we go. Gary Gulman, friends. The man, the legend, my friend. So much good stuff there. We were lucky to have a chance to speak to Gary today, and we especially thank him for making time for the early morning Ted Alexandro show. So much gratitude and appreciation to Gary Gulman. Well, friends, we will not be getting to texts today. We are going to wrap it up on that note. And I appreciate everyone who is joining us for the live stream. Early morning version of the Ted Alexandro show. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications. And of course, if you wish to subscribe to support our Patreon, go to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. And there are valuable prizes to be claimed there at either the $5 or $20 tier. Once again, that is patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. And we thank all the good folks who have already become patrons and are supporting the Ted Alexandro show. And our recent patrons, yes, our recent patrons, we would like to shout out Christopher Camp, Ryan Kelly, Phil Connors, and this name may be familiar to you, Lori Kilmartin. Thank you to our most recent patrons for supporting the work we are doing here at the Ted Alexandro Show. And thank you, all of you who are watching. And if you wish to also support, please go to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and listen to my comedy on Pandora, Spotify, etc. And thank you, one and all, for tuning into the Ted Alexandro Show. That is our show. We will see you next time, which should be Monday, this coming Monday at 7 p.m. Thank you, my friends. Be well. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you then.